to start what's going to be our next big land acquisition. We are going to eventually get to the Mexican American War. Now, I do need you to be certain that you get the years that go along with this, as this is going to be our next big bullet point. The Mexican American War is going to take place in 1846 when it starts, and it's going to go through 1848. Kind of. We are eventually going to get to this. But before I get to this, I have to set it up first. In order to set it up, I have to go back about a decade. We need to first start with the Texas War for Independence. Now, I have that. Is anyone in here from Texas? Andrew, what part of Texas are you from?
My mom's from Texas.
She's from Texas.
Yeah.
Okay.
From Austin.
Okay, from Austin. That's Austin's great. Do I have one more question? I will tell you. I've been to Texas a bunch of times. I think Texas is great. I think Texas is lovely. And Texans are weird. I say that. You agree with me? Okay, all right. I say that with all due respect because Texans are weird because Texans love Texas. Like, to a weird level, right, Andrew? Now, I was born and raised in Colorado. I love Colorado. I don't think I can compete with Texans because Texans just love Texas. Now, I will tell you this little story. I think this gives you a little window into Texas because a friend of mine, this was back in college, she said, you got to come down to Texas. Got to meet my parents. We're going to go to the lake, stay at our house at the lake. So myself and my 10 other friends, we went. Oh, okay.
My friend? Oh, God.
You meet your friends' parents, don't you? No? Never? Just don't do it? Okay, all right. Now, I go down there, it's myself, a bunch of our friends. I should have known something was up, but I wasn't sure at first. Go down there, they have this giant flagpole in their front yards. The American flag and the Texas flag underneath it. Now again, I should have known something was up. Walk into the house, like first room there's this gigantic Texas flag. Like the whole wall, Texas flag. You'd think I would have learned a lesson. I didn't. I thought, okay, that's a gigantic flag. Go into the next room. There's all these like Texas trinkets all over the place. Like things that are just shaped like Texas, just Texas heroes. And of course, guns on the wall. This is just how it works in Texas. It's what they do. I look at the Colorado thing. Is everything okay? It's like, it's how it works in Texas. There are more guns in Texas than people. It's true. Now, this is where it gets even more bizarre. I go into the bathroom. The sink is shaped like Texas. Like, I kid you not. I'm looking at it, I'm washing my hands, I'm like, is that Texas? Like, who even makes a Texas sink? Like, there's not a market for it. So I was telling this story years ago, I go, they don't make sinks in the shape of Colorado. And I had one kid, I remember, he goes, I was like, what? He goes, yes they do. Like, they make sinks in Colorado. He's like, they're square. Like, okay, like, you're right. My mistake. And he goes, like, no, you're not wasting my time. He's like, this guy's over here. I'm like, no. He goes, no, I have another comment. I'm like, I know you do. He goes, they also make sinks in the shape of Wyoming. Like, I shouldn't even brought this up. Like, you're right. He's like, I am right. 1 out of 50 is not bad. Now, Texans just have this weird love of Texas, and it might be because Texas just happens to be at kind of the strange crossroads of the Western Hemisphere. At one point or another, Texas is either owned or controlled by different empires or countries, at 6 different times. Texas, like I say, is at this weird crossroads. They used to be part of the gigantic Spanish Empire. Now, long story short, the Spanish Empire controlled almost all of South America, all of Central America, up into North America. They went almost as far north as Oregon until they destroyed their own economy and they collapsed. Now, when the Spanish economy, when the Spanish Empire starts to fall apart, some of their colonies start to gain independence. Mexico was one of these Spanish colonies that declares independence, wins a war for their own freedom, and now they're a new nation. Mexico controlled what we know today as Texas, but they have kind of a strange problem with it. Texas was always really difficult for Mexico to populate. It was one of the farthest northern reaching parts of their empire, and simply people didn't want to go there. Well, we are now in a spot where the United States is going to have this opportunity to somewhat solve the problem. Now remember, ever since the Revolution, we've been moving westward. We're going to bring in a few more states. We're going to buy Louisiana. Texas is just going to be next on the list. Now, as we are going westward, we might be a bit of a solution to this problem that Mexico has. Mexico sees these Americans moving westward and says, we're going to invite you in. We want you to populate Texas. Now, let me just kind of ask first. Why would Mexico want people populating Texas? What do they get out of it? Carly, what do they get?
Well, like the taxes on whatever.
Absolutely. The more people you have coming in, the more tax revenue there is. The thing about it is, what these Americans moving into Texas are going to realize very early on is that Texas has almost the perfect climate for growing a huge cash crop. Now keep in mind, this is still in the 1830s, even before that. The Civil War is yet to happen. Slavery is still ingrained in the southern states. As these Southerners are moving westward, Texas has this ideal climate for growing cotton. A massive cash crop. If you know what you're doing, you can be a millionaire on cotton. But it's fantastically labor intensive. It's tough to grow cotton. So these Southerners are going to have to bring slavery with them into Texas. The problem this makes for Mexico is that years before this, Mexico had outlawed slavery. These Americans bringing their slaves into Texas is a big potential problem. Now, for years, Mexico is going to kind of turn a blind eye. They're going to say, we just want this area populated. After a few years of seeing more and more people come into Texas and more slaves come with them, Mexico tells these Americans, we need to put some parameters on you moving into Texas. You need to be certain if you're coming into Texas, you give us 3 things. First, you must convert to Catholicism. Now, these are Protestants moving into Texas. Yes, Catholics and Protestants are both Christians, but they are very, very different. In fact, Catholics and Protestants have been killing each other for 1,000 years before this. Telling these Protestants that all of a sudden you're going to be Catholic is not easy to do. Now, also, we have a government telling these people, you will be a certain religion. But in the United States, we have First Amendment protections. We have freedom of speech. You have freedom of speech, yes. I did have some years ago be like, press. It's like, yeah, okay, that's First Amendment. I'm like, what else? You go, assembly. I'm like, what am I trying to get to here? And it's like, we have freedom of religion. I love it. Press. It's like, okay, yes, sir. Second thing they say is if you're coming into Mexico, you will pay Mexico taxes. Now again, we have Americans moving into this region who have not had any say in what these taxes will be, who do not have a chance to vote on the taxes. This is just a mere 60 years removed from our revolution, where we said no taxation without representation. Third, Mexico said you are not allowed to bring your slaves into Texas. Now you have to keep in mind, during this time period, slaves were considered to be property. Now you have the government saying you cannot bring your property. Hopefully this rings some bells. We have a situation where these people are being told, you will be a certain religion. You will pay Mexico taxes if you have a say in it or not. And we will deny you your property as well. Does this sound like the American Revolution? The Texans will simply tell Mexico, we're not going to comply. You are denying our unalienable rights. Now, by the 1930s, we're going to see Mexico have some very serious internal problems. Did I say 1930s? Did I misspeak? I'm sorry, 1830s. My mistake. By the 1830s, Mexico has these problems where there is someone who believes that he, and he alone, can solve them. A career military man will rise to power using what he has at his disposal. General Santa Anna will use force to overthrow the sitting Mexican government and puts himself in as basically, for all intents and purposes, he's dictator. When he comes to power, he tells these Americans living in Texas, you've had it too good for too long. I will enforce these laws.
Wasn't there a Civil War general who served?
From what, I'm sorry?
Was there a Civil War general who served?
In this war?
Yeah.
Yes, Robert E. Lee fights in this war. In fact, a bunch of Civil War generals are going to fight in this war. They're going to be the low-level officers when this takes place. When Santa Anna comes to power, he tells these Americans moving into Texas, you will comply, or I will make you comply. Now again, this is just a mere 60 years removed from the American Revolution. You start telling these Americans, we are going to deny you your freedom of religion, we're going to make you pay taxes you never approved of, and we're going to deny you your property. This sounds just like the reasoning behind the American Revolution. And when the government is no longer protecting you, it's not just your job, it's not just your obligation, it's your right to overthrow that government and establish one that will protect you. These Texans are ready for revolution. Are they, in fact, prepared for a revolution? Are they armed to the teeth? Leave it to the Texans. They have plenty of firepower. They have plenty of guns in Texas. They just don't necessarily have the numbers. These Texans are going to make their stand against Santa Anna as they are going to occupy this old Spanish mission, this old Spanish church outside of San Antonio called the Alamo. Now, I certainly hope that rings some bells. Heard of the Alamo Fort? This is going to be used as a fort, but the Alamo has some problems. At some points, the tallest walls in the Alamo are 4 feet tall. Do we see a problem?